Boy, it happened really like I guess it just took a pro day, but Jackson Smith and Jigba really turned a lot of heads and put himself in a position as potentially the number one wide receiver in this class. Do you think it's definite that he's going to be the number one receiver in this class?
I do not. I believe that a team that is looking for a slot or at least a part-time slot that can play outside a little bit, but he's primarily the slot, no question, he's the number one. But if you're looking for a sizable downfield threat that's going to be your outside, your X receiver, I think there's a shot we don't see him. We don't see him go first. No question, first rounder to me. But I don't think it's consensus that he's the number one guy.
Yeah, because if you look at it, what would you say that the possibilities of your top three of being the number one? And I'm talking about Quentin Johnson and Zay Flowers. Do you think that's it's between those three?
Yep. I think Johnson just is the standout with the size. If you want a little bit more of the vertical speed, build up speed, downfield threats, wide catch radius, Johnson is just so far above those two that you almost have to pick him if that's what you're looking to add to your offense. Flowers, in this era of football where separation is and yards after catch are becoming that quick, explosive, like, hey, I hit my top speed in 2 steps. Flowers is that guy. And from what I've heard, he's impressing teams in interviews that he's almost coming across as probably the most intellectual and smartest receiver in this draft at the top.
What about his size? What is that?
He's, I believe, I have the numbers in front of me. He measured in at 5'9", 182 with 29-inch arms, 72-inch wingspan. That is very small. That is smaller than what you would say, hey, if I have big, average, small, he's below the small line. You're drafting him because of the quickness, explosion, ability to separate, ability to make some things happen after the catch. But one thing that he has that the two guys above him don't, he was very versatile with where he aligned. A lot of teams don't like to take a receiver and put him into one spot. Johnston, weird stat about him, in 2021, he played pretty much every single one of his snaps on the right side. 2022, he played pretty much every single one of his snaps on the left side. And not only was he not playing slot and outside, he wasn't even going to the other side of the field. It's not a huge deal, and you don't want to use it against him, but you have to assume the learning curve there is going to be steeper. Someone asked me the other day, is Johnson going to be a year one contributor? Because that's their personal rule for a first round pick. I think you're going to have to be a lot more patient with him than the rest of the guys that are in this running. It's just a little bit more, and he's a raw pass catcher too. There's a lot of boxes that still need to be checked for him. I still have a first round grade on him. I still think very highly. The R-Lads guide has him as our number one receiver. I think it's warranted. Gun to my head, I like Smith and Jigba. I just feel better about him. But
he's got the size, he's got the physicality you're looking for, and he's got big playability. I mean, his yards per catch very high, so he's a playmaker. So he's the guy that has pretty much everything. Like, what did he run, by the way?
Right around 4.5, 4.52. And I'll tell you this about it. That's not overly impressive. It's not bad. But
that's what prevents him from being elite. That's what prevents him from being the absolute number one pick in the draft for a receiver.
Right. And I'll tell you what, I think just to build off that 40 talk with him, he's got what I call build-up speed, meaning it just takes him a little extra time to get going. But once he gets
going, you're not going to catch him. Yeah.
No. So let's not. I mean, Smith and Jigba also ran around a 4.52. Like, they're completely different. He's actually, if they race, Smith and Jigba would probably start ahead of him right away, and then Johnson would catch up. If you have him run a 60-yard dash, Johnson's 10 yards in front of him. So if he gets over the top of you, it's kind of like a DK Metcalf type. If he gets over the top, you're not catching him.
Hey, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, it is. Metcalf is such a freaky body type, but big, physical, build-up speed, a little bit of a raw. But if you hit on him and you develop him and he does hit a ceiling, he's a wide receiver one.
Yeah. All right. Yes, I agree. I mean, I'd have him as the number one receiver just because of that. Not that I don't like the other guys, but I just think he's got the other guys. You kind of know, chances are what their ceiling could be, but and that's good. It's good where that ceiling is going to be. But Johnson, his ceiling is way higher. So
Yeah. Yep.
now whether or not, but he also has a little bit of, because of his hands history, that's the big issue. Those inconsistent hands can cost him big time if he doesn't improve upon that in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, Zay Flowers and Johnson, they both have a 10% drop rate in college. And again, I've said this before, you want that number to be below 6%. That's really what you're aiming for. And they drop more passes than they should have in college. I think Johnson's was more mechanical concentration. Flowers he's not a big guy. Hands aren't very big, right? You're going to have to deal with both of that. Both those guys are going to be dealing with issues like that early in the career.
All right, Jordan Addison. Because Jordan Addison could have been the number one receiver, and that's really what a lot of people thought after the Biletnikoff season. But still, even though last year wasn't a home run for him, he still got the ability that no one was going to be surprised 3-4 years from now if he's the top receiver in this class.
Yeah, there's still a camp of supporters that believe Addison should be the first wide receiver taken in this draft. And, I have to be fair here. We'll talk about him, I'm sure, later. Cedric Tillman.
Yeah.
Him and Addison, if you want to get the best feel for what they can be, you got to go watch the 2021 tape. And if you do, if Addison opted out this year, which is funny, he went to USC, played with, Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, you probably would say, opted out, Jamar Chase type style, first-round pick. But 144 targets at Pittsburgh in 21, just 79 in 2022.
There you go.
Steam, injury, we just didn't see him get the ball enough. But he did show a different angle to his game. At Pitt, he was really a slot. He showed that he can line up on the outside and still get open. So that's important.
Where do you think he's best at?
Honestly, Stephon Diggs type role, split right down the middle, half outside, half inside. I think he can do it. But the pre-draft process has not been friendly to him. Measured in a little smaller than what we thought, 5'11", 173. Didn't measure in as fast as we thought, as quick. Arms are short, hands are small. These traits and his 2022 tape, they scream day 2. And that is where I ended up leaving him, was at the top of round 2. So if I see someone take him in round 1, I'll call it a reach. The traits just are not there. And part of me has this thinking that maybe that Biletnikoff year, that award year in 2021 was a little engineered for him. Just like I feel that way about a lot of players when you bring up production, that it was engineered for them rather than them going out and earning it.
Do you think he should be a punt returner?
Yeah, I love.
Or is he too valuable?
No, I don't think he's too valuable.
Okay.
If we're talking 2021 version, right? If he opted out, maybe we would say that. But I think he proved in 2022 that we need to see a little bit more out of him. And that could be what we need to see is the return ability. Question will be durability at that point. The body type isn't there. It's 170 pounds,
Okay. Let's talk about those two Tennessee receivers, Tillman and Hyatt. And like you said, Tillman had a huge 21, almost a 17-yard average per catch. A lot to like about him. Physical receiver, all that, playmaker. Things did not go well for him this past year. He had the ankle injuries. But then you take a look at Hyatt, and Hyatt had the luxury with his elite speed and the breakout of Hendon Hooker to take advantage of that final season that Tillman was not able to. But overall, as you have ranked him, Tillman still, though, is a more complete receiver.
Absolutely. 6'3", 213, enormous hands, 10-inch hands, long arms. I mean, huge radius, better athlete than people think. Jumped really high. The 40 was right around, I believe it was around 4.5. Again, he's in that Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnson tier. Similar to Johnson, build-up speed. If he gets behind you, you're not going to get him. But maybe not the most sudden mover, but still a really well-developed route runner. And I used his 2021 tape for 90% of my scouting report on him. Obviously, I watched what he did in 2022, but he had a really significant and unique ankle injury that required a surgery that is not done on guys often that want to go back and play football. And I actually give this kid a ton of credit. The book on him coming into the year is how competitive he was, how coachable he was, how much of a team guy he was. And he put that on display by coming back and playing this year. I think almost every receiver that we've talked about, I mean, what did Smith and Jigba do this year? Pretty much shut it down once he got hurt. Most of these guys would have done what Smith and Jigba did. The fact that he came back out and tried to help that team win says a lot about him. Now, you're not going to use a first-round pick on a guy because of that. But when you combine that mental trait with what he has on tape in 2021, you talked about those stats, right? I mean, 64 catches, 1,081 yards, 12 touchdowns in the SEC with a Hendon Hooker that was still trying to figure this out a little bit. Right?
And almost a 17-yard average.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about a guy that almost never drops the ball. We talked about a 10% drop rate with Johnson and Flowers. This guy dropped the ball at 4%, and over 50% in contested situations. That's a number you don't see often.
And with that high percentage, high catch percentage, that's very rare. So
it's exactly, that's the good word for it, Greg. It's rare, and you get to know him a little bit. You watch him talk a little bit. Again, I try to avoid becoming a psychiatrist, but I do like watching these guys talk. I will literally sit on YouTube and watch interviews of these guys and from a training camp practice 2 years ago. And this is the kind of guy I think coaches, when they get involved, they're going to want this kid on their team.
All right, so that next group, and you can include Tillman, Hyatt, you got Marvin Mims, you got Josh Downs. Are they kind of together there?
Yep. I have Hyatt, Mims, Downs, and Dell, all is the same exact grade. So
okay. We talked a lot about Dell. And I know he's got the size limitations, but again, if Tutu Atwell can get drafted high, then Nathaniel Dell will probably get drafted high as well.
Yeah, I was on an interview last night. That's exactly what the guy said. Was if Tutu Atwell can get drafted at that size in the second round, so can Dell. I mean, Dell's a much more complete receiver. Not the same size as Kadarius Toney, but the trait that stands out, Toney had and still has, that Dell has, he's unbelievably quick out of breaks. Like, it's almost like there's something missing in his lower body that restricts movement, because he can turn on a dime as well as anyone. And even though he's not small, go watch some of his red zone tape, right? When you think red zone receivers, what do you think? Big, physical, go up and get it. He was unstoppable in those situations. Why? Because him and Clayton Tune had a good thing going. You just knew he was going to get open. He would come off the line. You'd see 2-3 bodies. They're like, all right, there's no way this guy's going to find a crease. He always found it because he just explodes out of a cannon. I think that's a trait. Are there limitations to his game? Absolutely. But this is a guy, when you look at the size, you almost don't care as much as some of the other ones because he's so competitive. He's so tough. His nickname is what? Tank. This is a guy that plays like he's 195 pounds. And you watch him block, he gets it done there too. So, yeah, I mean, 160 pounds, I mean, I think that's where he measured in at, right, was 165 pounds. Yes, that's still 165 pounds when you come in contact with grown men in the NFL. But like Deuce Vaughn, you got to touch him first.
Sure. And this is definitely a kick returner.
Yeah.
This is a guy that you're going to put a punt return game, a kick return game, any chance that you can get him the ball in those types of situations, you got to do it. So that's what he's going to add to your team too. Sort of like, almost very similar to how you looked at Marcus Jones last year from the same school.
Yeah.
A guy that was a little bit smaller. You didn't know like how that would affect his overall game, but playmaker. And you saw it in the NFL. You saw it in his first season. He was making plays and playing a lot better than people thought based on his size. And I know Dell's smaller, but he could be the same type of you can get the same type of production. All right. Now go over outside of the top 10, go over the receivers that you think, because there's a lot of them. It's a very, it's a nice deep class as usual. So give me some guys that you think we should keep an eye on.
The number one guy I want to talk about is Charlie Jones from Purdue.
Oh, yeah, Charlie Jones.
Started off at Buffalo. Does anyone even know that, right? Goes to Iowa, makes his mark as a returner, but barely saw any action in that garbage offense as a receiver. Goes to Purdue to play with his Pop Warner quarterback, Aiden O'Connell. Last-ditch effort. Let's see what we can do. Maybe I'll get a job somewhere outside of football once it's done. Goes out and just tears it up from week one, too. I mean, the kid right away. My favorite thing about his game was when he faced off against Devin Weatherspoon, Joey Porter Jr., and Garrett Williams, all cornerbacks. Garrett Williams from Syracuse, Porter from Penn State, Weatherspoon from Illinois, all pro cornerbacks. 2 of them were going to be first rounders. He beat them. And it wasn't like a one-time thing. He beat them. Watch the entire tape. I don't want to say he's the better player, but I kind of do, right? I mean, those are the tapes that I love watching the most, is when these guys were matched up against their best competition. And then he goes out to the combine, and I did not see this coming. He ran He ran a 4.43. I thought he'd be more of a 4.5 guy. Again, I'm not going to overreact to that. But now we're talking about a guy that has a really good tape against really good competition. That is one of the top, 10 fastest receivers at the draft in the combine. Measured in a little light, 5'11", 175, but nothing that I'm going to be overly concerned about. Watch him catch the football. Watch him run routes. This is a pro receiver, and he's inside-out versatility. I have him as a 4th rounder. I'm not getting overexcited here.
But that doesn't mean that he's going to end up as a 4th round productive guy.
Right. I feel safe with him. When you start drafting a receivers day 3, I mean, you're locking like 1 out of 3 really pan out to be something in the NFL, maybe beyond special teams. I'm talking offensive football. This is going to be one of those 3. He's going to be that guy. You put him against other receivers that are going day 3. I think there's a shot that a team picks him at the end of the day too. I have that kind of outlook on him. But he's like really my favorite guy that's not in my top 10 that I'm really confident is going to have a good career at the next level.
And by the way, keep this in mind, because this is very important for anybody out there that is wondering, we haven't had time to talk about the player you like. And once you get a hold of the draft guide, the RLS draft guide, you can be able to see all of these players that we don't have time to talk about. But the other thing to keep in mind is we are going to have our draft review shows, and we're going to be going through every team. And when we go through every team, we're going to have more time to go through every player. And that's really going to be a good time, that if we're missing the opportunity to talk about one of the players that you'd like us to talk about, we will be talking about that player for sure when we get around to the draft review portion videos. So just keep that in mind.